Okay, let's start. Welcome everybody to our webinar on increasing sustainable and resiliency in supply chains. We wanted to show you the rationale behind this webinar. So globalization has shifted trade patterns and dynamics and value chains and production networks. And this has enabled European companies to integrate into global value chains and create jobs, right? But in reality, these transformations have also entailed social, economic, and environmental challenges. And we have seen events such as COVID-19, the war of Ukraine, and Brexit, and how they have shed light on these challenges. Now, European policy priorities include social resilience and competitive sustainability, and are calling for an analysis of the impacts these kind of events have had on supply chains. But not only that, they are also asking to know how supply chains should be redefined to be more resilient, sustainable, and yield a positive social impact. And this, with this all in mind, is where twin SEEDS, RETHINK-GSC and ReSChape European funded projects were conceived. These projects are going to provide policy scenarios, but also recommendations to help supply chains be fair, inclusive, and sustainable, and create these inclusive and sustainable trade patterns. So we hope that today's webinar will also shed light on the insights that these three projects are creating in the field of creating sustainable and resilient supply chains. Without further ado, let me show you the agenda for the day. So I'm Carolina Cipres, I'm Director of Research at Zaragoza Logistics Center, and I will be the moderator of the webinar. Afterwards, we will have our first speaker, Roberta Capello, presenting Twin SEEDS project. Then we will have Marta Bistreit presenting RETHINK-GSC project. Later, ReSChape project introduced by Dimitra Kalazzi. And finally, a discussion and open questions, hopefully supported by Miro if we have time for that. And then conclusions and wrap up and end of the webinar where we hope you gain the insights we intend for the day. So let me start with our first speaker, that is Dr. Roberta Capello. Roberta Capello is full professor of regional and urban economics at Politecnico di Milano. She's the lead partner of the Twin SEEDS project. She's the president of the European Regional Science Association and past president of the Regional Science Association International. She is past editor-in-chief of Papers in Regional Science, founder and editor-in-chief of the Italian Journal of Regional Science. She is also the author of a textbook in regional economics published in English, Italian, and Chinese. So Roberta, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to share my screen. Here we are. Just let me know whether you can see it or not. Is it okay? Is it okay? Good. So as it was said, I am the lead partner of one of the three projects financed by the EU dealing with the restructuring of JVCs. The acronym is Twin SEEDS and stands for Towards a World Integrated and Socio-Economically Balanced European Economic Development Scenario. Our consortium is made of 11 partners, so it's of course a big consortium as usual in the Horizon projects, and we are spread around, as you can see here, all over Europe, which is something extremely important to have different perspectives involved. Of course, we are also specialists in different fields, disciplines from regional economics, international business, or experts in organization within firms. So we have quite a number of expertise that can deal with the subject that we're speaking about. So what is the Twin SEEDS project about? So we have four main objectives. First of all, to explore the geographical reorganization of JVCs. As all the other two projects, we are halfway through. This is important to know. So this proposal was written during the COVID period. In 2020, I remember I was sitting in my home writing the proposal together with the partners. So now it's something that is very well known, but at that time we were start thinking on how the COVID pandemic would have changed this type of trade and this type of integration, world integration. And in fact, the second aim is to highlight the effects of the challenges that were posed by the COVID-19 pandemic to trade relations and JVCs. The third issue is how to the recent and emerging JVC reorganizations impact on employment, productivity dynamics, environmental issues, growth, and last but not least, inequalities, intended in many ways as regional inequalities, income inequalities, individual inequalities, gender inequalities, and all this, which is strongly related to all the changes that occur. The last aim is to build scenarios for what is called a new normal trade relationship scenario for a spectrum of interrelated policies in the key policy areas of trade and investment, competition, and social policies. We will see how we do with that. So the structure is quite simple. We have, first of all, the two twin seeds that drive the development of JVCs and the way they shape their forms, which are from one point, from one side, the geopolitical institutional relations, and on the other side, the technological trajectories. Here we were very much, let's say, we were not yet influenced by the new geopolitical conflicts that unfortunately took place since 2 years now. And I will suggest how we can englobe these types of changes that occurred after the presentation of our proposal. So we have a first work package dealing with the past and how these JVCs were developed, and just to especially on trade on one side and production, so M&Es, multinational companies strategies on the other. Then we have the work package 2 dealing with the impact of the pandemic. Then we move to the to 3 work packages dealing with the impact or longer term implications of the changes in JVCs. And then we have the package for scenarios, and then the package on policy recommendations. What are the innovative aspects that characterize our project? Well, first of all, of course, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on JVCs is something new. And also because the pandemic has just finished. And we go through these analyses via case studies on key sectors, because this is the best way to deal with something that is so new. On the other hand, we deal with the macroeconomic effects that are there, but that could be there with the COVID pandemic and the effects on JVCs via what we call a quasi-experiment of analyzing the 2008 crisis and its effect on JVC's restructuring. So we try to learn something from a big shock that was there, even if the causes were completely different, the shock was there. So we try to understand something from that shock particularly and try to learn something for the pandemic period. The second new novelty is that we look at the reorganization trends of JVCs after periods of crisis. And this is done at different levels. We are at the intra-firm level, we are at the firm level, we are at the sectoral level, and we are at the macroeconomic aggregate level, both at regional, where I mean NUTS 2 regions, and nations, that is NUTS 0. And so we want to capture whether the effects are heterogeneous at the different levels. I think that another point of richness, another source of richness, is that we put together analyses that are very different and very complementary one another. That we have qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis, and we are able to analyze and put together the different impacts of changes in JVCs on economic, environmental effects. And then the scenarios. And the scenarios where, as I said, we are looking for a new normal scenario. We would like, and this is something that we have to suggest to the DG, to take into consideration also the effects of the new geopolitical conflicts that occurred since the 2022 Ukraine-Russia conflict. So just briefly, we finished up to now Work Package 1 and Work Package 2. In Work Package 1, we, let's say, found something that was already, so we reinforced some already existing knowledge in the field. And we found out JVCs have created a fierce competition between firms and countries to capture jobs and income. So this is something that firms and nations have to cope with. We also found out that all Eastern European countries have increased their share of GVC's income over time at the expenses of Western European countries. However, Eastern European shares remain much smaller than those of Western countries. And this is something that probably was already known, but this reinforces the knowledge in this respect. There is a clear geographical division of labor within the EU, again, something probably known, but again, this comes from a very good database. And we found out that there are Western EU countries specialized in pre- and post-production functions, whereas Southern and Eastern EU countries specialize in production, so famous factory of Europe is still there. Europe remains, and this is something probably less known, remains a dependent economy from what concerns R&D activities, whose imported share increases. So we still are very much dependent on R&D activities that take place in JVCs outside Europe. And this is a trend which is opposite to what happens in China, for example. So I think that one of the main messages that comes out of the first work package is that Western Europe still leads JVCs for what concerns high-level functions with respect to Eastern countries. But when we look at Europe with respect to the world, we find that European economy is still dependent on the rest of the world for high-level functions, such as R&D activities. Going on with the second work package, we found out at the case study level, we analyzed the healthcare particularly and the vaccine manufacturing supply chain. And we find out that when analyzing this type of global value chains, when analyzing healthcare and especially vaccine manufacturers, which were considered key JVCs maintaining resilience, Europe has lagged in its response to the pandemic, compared, for example, to the US. Research capabilities as well as manufacturing facilities have been expanded in Europe, and a governance structure has been created to handle similar health crises in the future. So we learned something on that. At the firm level, in the high-tech sector, challenges during and after the reshoring process have emerged, attributable to the loss of know-how and competencies within their home countries. At the production level, we found something at the aggregate production level. So looking at the behavior of multinational enterprises, we find out that during the pandemic, global production was restructured, but up to a certain extent. So the foreign subsidiaries' share of EU M&Es did not change much on average, which implies that EU M&Es remained cautious and did not go under major shifts. So the impact of COVID-19 does not lead directly to organizational changes, but to a reconsideration of partners. And this is an important message. So again, a main message that comes from this work package is that there is a strong heterogeneity in the phenomenon of JVC's organizations once it is analyzed at the different levels that I mentioned, at firm or at aggregate level. And this is an important message that drives us to the work packages 3, 4, and 5 that look at the impact. And here I can only tell you some preliminary research findings because we are still working on that, and we are far from the end of these work packages. So we still have some months to go. But what we are trying to understand are the effects of JVC's restructuring are strongly mediated by firms' characteristics and by regional and national context conditions. So it's not something that takes place naturally and in a very equal way, but it's strongly, again, mediated according to the type of firms and to the type of context conditions that we have in place. So JVC, for example, JVC's restructuring is not by definition associated with a change in manufacturing jobs. And this is something extremely important for the policy side and for all the open strategic autonomy idea. So what matters in order to get an effect on manufacturing jobs is the capacity of the economic system, this is dealt with at the regional level, to participate in JVCs by retaining value added. So if an economy is able to, with its actors, is able to join JVCs and retain much of the value added, then an increase in the value added, then we can expect an increase in manufacturing jobs. Backshoring, which is something that we can measure at the aggregate level, even if it is not a very large phenomenon, does not generate immediately an increase in low-skilled manufacturing employment. And especially this doesn't take place everywhere, but only in regions with a traditional manufacturing specialization. And this is, again, very, very important from the point of view of recreating our industrial vocations. And again, this has to be taken into consideration for the policy aspects. Another example is that nearshoring generates growth for European regions that host this type of production coming back, causing, however, an increase in regional inequalities. So again, huge importance in terms of policy recommendations. So preliminary curriculum policy recommendations, and then I go to the end of the presentation and leave the floor for questions. So we have trade and investment policies where we found out that non-tariff measures pose a higher challenge to multinational enterprises' subsidies activity and performance than tariff measures. High-tech manufacturing subsidiaries are particularly vulnerable to non-tariff measures as they suffer higher regulatory losses. Another interesting result is that bilateral investment treaties, together with a credible commitment to a high-level investor protections, are important to stimulate the formation and consolidation of international production networks driven by EU multinational companies. In terms of EU industrial and trade policies, and especially what is called the open strategic autonomy, this is something we have quite some interesting messages. The open strategic autonomy calls for specific regional actions, since the outcome of reshoring depends on the strategy with which firms located in a region reposition themselves within the JVCs. As I said, they have to climb the ladder of the value added, so they have to go upward if they want to get employment effects, positive effects on employment. We have the type of regions in which reshoring takes place, traditional manufacturing regions versus emerging regions that react differently to the employee. So we need different regional policies in order to grasp the positive effects stemming from JVC's restructuring. Again, another important result at present is that the open strategic autonomy calls for a creation of a sound investment environment and strong coordination between trade and industrial policies is absolutely important. Linked to what I said before, we have the EU cohesion policy that has to take into consideration that the open strategic economy has to be coordinated with what you want to get out of cohesion policy, which means equity and leading to better interregional equality and possible income distribution, equal distribution. In that, JVC's restructuring, in fact, if we leave to market, if left to market forces, they probably increase regional inequalities. We have to check that, once again, these are preliminary policy considerations, but just to give you an idea of where we are, what we are dealing with. It's a big project. Summarizing it sometimes becomes very difficult because you lose the richness of all individual works, but I hope I gave you an idea. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Roberta. Let's see if we have some questions for Roberta in the chat. I don't see any question. You can leave. Okay, there is some question. Aulat, you can say it up loud then if you want.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for nice presentations. And yeah, I just want to know one thing about that. You mentioned the global value chain is mediated by farm characteristics, region, and country things. But I just want to know what it is related with the adoption of digitalization from the different actors in the different region. How digitalizations also mediated, or did you consider the digitalization or just the normal farms characteristics, region, or the country regulations? Just want to know about the digitalizations.
Thank you. Yes, digitalization is part of the new technologies that are there and can be, let's say, exploited by multinationals and by these types of production organization, international production organization. What we have seen is that in the past, automation led to to some changes in global value chains. Of course, digitalization checkers, we haven't checked now of the impact of digitalization on JVCs. What we have seen, what we are trying to measure, it's still ongoing, is whether backshoring takes place more easily in areas where there is a higher automation process, and what this is the effect in terms of income distribution between low and high workers, and whether what is the impact in terms of regional inequality. So it's a good question, but we haven't got the answer yet. We are working on this part of the project, and I thank you very much for highlighting the importance of our future results. Thank you very much, Ola.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We have time for another question, and the rest we can see it at the end in the discussion session, either in the chat or you can raise your hand. So I don't see any other question. So then we move on.
You.
Okay, thank you, Roberta. We move on, and then at the end, you can if you come up with questions, you can leave them in the chat, and we will cover them later on. Okay. So then let me move on to our next speaker, Dr. Marta Bistrai. Marta Bistrai is a research fellow at the Institute of Economics of the Hungarian Research Network Center for Economic and Regional Studies. Her research areas are international trade and empirical industrial organization. She has participated in multiple research projects at the European Commission, being an institute and work package lead in the previous Horizon 2020 project MicroPod, as well as currently in RETHINK-GSC, that is today's session. Previously, she taught at the Corvinus University of Budapest and at the Eötvös Loránd University. She has a PhD from the Central European University. Marta, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Carolina. I'm sharing my screen. Okay. So thank you for having me again. I will talk about one part of the RETHINK-GSC project today. So as opposed to Roberta, I won't give you a full preview of our project, but would like to focus on one key element. So in this, I will focus on our attempt to assess the resilience of European companies facing global value chain disruptions. And what I will show you today is based on joint work with colleagues from the Center for Economic and Regional Studies, Hungary, and from WIFO, Austria. So before starting with what I promised, I would still like to give you a very brief overview of the RETHINK-GSC project. So in this, our aim is to understand the changing nature of global value chains, and our special focus is on something which is very important and which is becoming more and more important over time, but which is really challenging to measure and to capture, the role of knowledge flows and the role of intangibles in general. We would like to understand how they interact with tangible inputs, what is their impact on social, economic, and environmental outcomes, and how they affect the resilience of global supply chains. So as you can see in this table, there are 11 institutions participating in our project from 10 different countries. We are also very widespread within Europe, and as it turned out to be, it was very important for our survey, which I will tell you about in the following couple of minutes. So one big part of the RETHINK-GSC Horizon project is a firm-level survey, which we carry out in multiple countries and which focuses on supply chain disruptions. And more general, the relationship of firms, European firms with their suppliers around the world. So what is the supply chain disruption survey and why do we need this? I think it's no need to elaborate on the recent disruptions and major problems which caused issues for firms within Europe and also outside of it, of course. The COVID-19 pandemic, geopolitical tensions, war in Ukraine, all these are still partly ongoing challenges for firms in terms of their suppliers. And we already know a lot about this, but there are many aspects which are still in the shade because we can hear about anecdotal evidence, but it's very different to look at it at the large scale and to quantify. So this is where we want to jump in. We would like to understand how all these disruptions and how all these changing times affected the relationship between suppliers and buyers, how it changed the expectation of firms, and what was their reactions, which we can see. And also to what extent these disruptions had only temporary changes or effects or long-run changes. As this is still an ongoing survey, which is expected to be finished with the first round in March, we will have a second round next year. But as it is still ongoing, today I will only show you some preliminary first patterns. So this map shows you the 4 countries in which we conducted the survey: Denmark, Germany, Austria, and Hungary. Luckily, we all have some consortium partners from there who were very helpful for us. And also the German Chamber of Commerce and associations, industry associations from Denmark and Hungary were very key and helpful for conducting the survey in other countries as well. This is an all survey targeting medium-sized or larger firms operating in manufacturing, in which it is sort of straightforward how to capture the suppliers, the key strategic suppliers. That's what we focused on. Up to the time being, so for the time being, we have about 760 responses. The results I will show you are based on somewhat smaller number of responses, from which the half of is from Germany, and the 2 other remaining quarters are from Austria and Hungary. What is also a key feature of this survey is that we asked for permission from our respondents to link their survey responses to administrative firm level data. And that's crucial because in this sense, or this enables us to get a more detailed information about the firms, to analyze the links between firm characteristics and the reaction of firms or the perception of firms, of course, ensuring full anonymity, but at the industrial level, still being able to find some patterns which might be interesting also for policymakers. And also, on the other hand, we are interested in firms applying different strategies to cope with these disruptions. Which of these prove to be successful? So what is their connection to firm performance, which we can see from the data? So let's start with data, what we see there from the survey. First of all, I would like to give you a brief overview about our sample in terms of the firm's sourcing strategies. So on the left, you can see the share of firms considering specific geographical markets as important or very important. And you can see in the first 2 times 3 bars that the domestic market and the within EU market is very important for the majority of firms. Still, our sample is nicely composed in a sense that there are many firms who are also opening outside Europe. I mean, Asia, China, India, and other Asian countries are also important for a considerable part of our sample. On the right-hand side, you can see what the firms expect for the future, to what extent a specific geographical market is expected to become more or less important in terms of their sourcing strategies. And you can see that for basically there is kind of a stability which we can expect, I think, by this time. The majority of firms reported that the specific geographical market stays similarly important as before, from which it is sourcing. At the same time, there are 2 slightly interesting patterns, I think, which we can draw from here. One is that there seems to be some kind of a shift towards European Union, more precisely. So there are more firms claiming that it will become a more important sourcing country for them than those who think it will become less important. And the other striking pattern is Russia, which is not that surprising. Many firms claiming or expecting to decrease in its importance for their sourcing. Still, we don't know how long-term these changes will be, but with our second round, we might learn more about that. We also asked firms about the disruptions they experienced, what was the source, and how long-lasting these were. On these two plots, we differentiated the respondents by the type of sourcing region. So on the left-hand side, you can see firms having only EU suppliers, within EU suppliers, and on the right-hand side, there are the ones which are more diversified in a sense that they also have suppliers outside the EU. You can see that basically the main patterns are the same. Many of the firms were hit both by COVID, somewhat less, but still a considerable share were hit by the Russian war in Ukraine. At the same time, more of the firms reported temporary problems than long-lasting disruptions. And there are some differences by firm size, larger firms being more hit by COVID, but the general patterns carry among different size of firm size as well. So given that there were disruptions, even though only temporary for some firms, that's a question how they reacted. And one straightforward thing to assume is that if there is a disruption, they had to find other sources for specific inputs. But how they did that? So the question here was whether they switched from one supplier to the other, terminating the relationship with the first, or they included new suppliers while keeping the old ones. So whether the COVID disruptions or the other disruptions caused by geopolitical tensions, whether these sort of shaked up the existing relationships, or there was rather kind of diversification, increasing the number of suppliers. And as you can see, the central or the columns in the middle showing the share of firms with only European suppliers or also Asian ones or other parts of the world, claiming that they added new suppliers while keeping the old ones. And there were much less switching suppliers. Those use these mixed strategies of both adding new and switching some which had suppliers outside Europe. So there they had to do more adjustment, but more generally, some kind of a hint for an increased diversification is what we can see from these early patterns. Our next question was about how firms perceive risk of input disruptions, and more precisely, risk coming from a specific reason. Here, I just wanted to highlight a few from the sub-questions we asked. So one was about what is the probability of input disruption due to quality problem at the supplier, which we think of as some kind of an idiosyncratic shock affecting a single firm for some reason, nothing to do with changes in the overall economic environment. And you can see here is that sort of the distribution of responses is sort of even. For some firms, it's expected to be a very rare event. For others, it happens more than once a year. And if you compare it to expected disruptions for other reasons, like political interventions, it can be some kind of limited mobility due to some health risk, or it can be some other geopolitical tensions or even war. we didn't specify that, but it needs to be the result of political intervention, you don't see much change in that compared to the expected frequency or probability of a disruption due to a quality problem. And the same thing is true for any event which affects more than one supplier. In this, we wanted to think about some kind of more systemic problems. However, if you look at the right panel of each subfigure, you can see there the share of respondents within a specific column, which thought that this probability or the frequency, as we asked, expected frequency increased from pre-COVID. And you can see that for the quality problem, there are some who think, but it's not that prevalent. At the same time, firms do expect that disruptions due to political interventions and also disruptions affecting more than one supplier at the same time, they became more prevalent, and they are expected to come more than they used to. So firms seem to be aware that firms seem to think that things has changed, and now the further question is, what do they do? And one potential solution might be to collect more information to be able to adapt in a better way. One potential is to do audit, but not only with direct suppliers, but also indirect ones. We asked about this, and we can see that still just the indirect suppliers being supplier of a supplier, so simply 2 steps away from the buyer firm, they are not that frequently audited, even though we asked about not only official and regular audits, but also more ad hoc ones. And firms being more far away in the supply chain, they are even less known about. At the same time, you can see that this auditing activity is more important and more prevalent for those firms who declare to have a long-term contracting relationship with a key supplier we ask about later on. So it seems that there's some kind of a difference between 2 types of firms, which you can see more of in the coming few slides. So those who tend to have more relational links, as we say it in economics, though those who are stronger connected to their suppliers, and those who are not. So our next question was about how their collaboration patterns change with suppliers, and here we partly asked about information sharing. So in the first column, you see the share of firms who responded that they share information with their suppliers about their input market more than they used to do it before COVID. And again, just as in the previous slide, you can see that it's a non-negligible share of firms who said yes to this question. Second, it's even more prevalent among those firms who have sort of stronger and longer lasting relations with their suppliers. But we also see this difference for joint innovation, sharing know-how, product market information, and even technology. So there seems to be some kind of an increased collaboration with suppliers for a non-negligible share of firms. Then the second important thing, which is might not be so strongly related to disruptions, but still to COVID definitely, resulting in some kind of a technology change, is the communication mode firms apply. So we wanted to have an idea about the links between the way firms communicate with their suppliers and what they do with them, whether they increase joint activities and so on. So we asked the frequency, the current frequency of face-to-face communication specifically. We also asked about online and so on. But here I show you the share communicating face-to-face with suppliers almost never, once a year, once a month, or almost every day. And you can see that the distribution again is sort of, it's sort of, firms are sort of evenly distributed among these categories. And what's even more interesting, because we all know that COVID pushed communication to the online space, but it was not trivial to what extent it went back. And we see that if they compare the current situation to the pre-COVID situation, almost half of the firms said that the face-to-face frequency decreased. At the same time, we were interested in what it means. What firms do lose with that, if anything. And with our pilot interviews, it became clear that even if the frequency of face-to-face communication decreased, and firms or our respondents at least many times did not hold it as something very important anymore, when we asked about the integration of a new supplier, building trust with it, then they immediately responded, yes, in that setting it's important. And what we also have in mind is that it might also be important when it's about cooperation and collaboration and knowledge flows with suppliers. And here I just show you the share of firms who responded, and so it's divided by low, medium, and high frequency of face-to-face communication. And within these categories, what is the share of firms which reported that having no face-to-face communication possibility when integrating a new supplier had no impact on the process, slight impact or strong impact. And what I would like to highlight here is even those who rarely communicate face-to-face with their suppliers, many of these firms think that it would have some impact, at least some negative impact on the integration process. So face-to-face seemed to be still important. And if we divide the same thing by those firms which tend to share information with the suppliers or not, then you can see that the impact is assumed to be higher or expected to be higher by those firms which tend to share information with their suppliers. So just to wrap up very briefly, because I'm out of time, the lessons so far are that disruptions were widespread, but mostly temporary. Many expect that some types of disruptions will become more frequent in the future. We see some kind of unexpected shifts towards sourcing from the EU, but of course we need to learn more about that. Firms seem to diversify, but at the same time they try to get more information from the suppliers. And face-to-face communication is less prevalent, but it's still important for different settings like collaboration or building trust. And the next step is to connect everything to firm level data and learn about the links between firm strategies and performance. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Marta. Is there any question? I don't see questions in the chat, but maybe you can raise your hand if you want to ask any question. Yep, you have one question, Marta. Did you find evidence that reshoring, so moving production of inputs back from locations outside Europe, has increased due to or after the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, thank you very much. It would be very nice to see. We already had a long questionnaire, so we could not ask everything, and we think that this is something which you can sort of get involved from, get informed from some official statistics as well. So we rather focused on more soft types of the relations and less of this kind of reshowing patterns. what we see is what I showed you before, that many firms, I mean, a considerable share of firms wrote that EU will become more important, but that doesn't mean that they don't want to keep sourcing outside Europe as well.
Another question
yeah.
about sectoral effects and how you will explore them.
Yeah, I haven't showed that yet. Thank you very much. We have the sectors. I mean, we have the industry of the firms, and we plan to look at patterns, of course, by industry. But as I told you, it was just very preliminary, so we are not there yet. But we will do heterogeneities by industry, definitely. Thank you.
You have a question from Roberta.
Yeah, thank you very much for this interesting presentation, which is also interesting because it reinforces some of our results. So we are on the same track in this respect. My question is whether, apart from the sectoral component, whether you look at these types of replies according to the position of the firms within global value chains. So when you speak about suppliers, which types of suppliers are you speaking about? Are they, okay, you got what I mean. So which is the position of the first one? Second, whether you looked at geographical reorganizations and whether, so you say Europe versus, but in terms of policy recommendations for the EU, probably some better understanding of of where these effects and these perceptions are related. It's important. The third point is that I remembered in one of our first exchange within our 3 projects that yours was very much linked to the knowledge exchange. And I remember that I got fascinated by that part because I thought that this was complementary to ours and the other one. But I missed a little bit this part in your presentation. So I wonder whether this is part of another work package or whatever. So because I was interested in some results in that respect. Thank you very much, Marta.
Thank you for your questions. Yes, I agree that that our results are nicely in line with each other. So concerning your first question about the position in the supply chain, so what we know about is the input. Most of the time, if the respondents gave us, we know the input they talk about when, I mean, the input they source from the supplier they talk about in the survey. Unfortunately, we don't know much beyond that, so we haven't had the chance to get a better idea about their position. But I still think that knowing the input they source and knowing their industry, we can get some idea about that. Concerning your second question on the geographical reorganization, I fully agree. It would be very nice to know more about that. Unfortunately, we could not ask more detailed questions given the length of the survey and the many things we wanted to learn about. Maybe in the second round, there will be some chance for that. Thank you for the suggestion. And about the knowledge exchange, again, there we have something, even something more than I've showed you today. But there are definitely other work packages and other data used for looking at that, like dependencies in software production, and also knowledge input-output matrices were produced and will be analyzed further on. So it's just one segment of all that what we would like to learn about and analyze in the project.
Okay, thank you, Marta. There are 3 questions in the chat for you, but I'm going to leave them for the discussion at the end.
Perfect. Yeah,
because for the sake of time, we now have to move on to the next speaker. But
thank you.
We don't lose them, so do not worry. We will recover them at the end of the webinar. So let me introduce you to our last speaker, Dr. Dimitra Kalatsi. Dimitra Kalatsi is lecturer in logistics and supply chain at Aston University. Dimitra has a solid experience in the field of logistics and supply chain management with research interest in sustainability, circular economy, and emerging technologies to support supply chain management. Before joining Aston University, she was working as a lecturer at Birmingham City University, but she also has experience of working on different supply chain projects at Cambridge University and Aston University. So Dimitra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Caroline. No, thank you. Just let me share my screen. I hope you can see my screen. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Carolina Sedis Dimitra Kalaitzi, and I'm from Aston University. So today I will present you about our ReSChape project, which stands for Reshaping Supply Chains for Positive Social Impact. As you will see, we are actually 10 partners from different parts, 2 from the United Kingdom, Aston University, Cranfield University. Our project coordinator is Rosanna Fornaziero from National Research Council of Italy, CNR, and we have also 2 partners from Germany, Fraunhofer Institute, IML, and of course the Leibniz Institute for Economics Research, RWI. And from Spain, we have Zaragoza Logistics Center, University of Deusto, Iris Technology Solutions, and from Netherlands, we have the Technical University of Eindhoven. So you can see strong institutes from all over the place that we try to tackle some specific issues. Actually, the motivation for the project, as Roberta said previously, also was from the major uncertainties that we face in the supply chain, such as COVID-19, and that disrupted our daily lives, but also the overall business environment. And of course, this had an impact also on the poverty and also the human like employability. A lot of people lost their job. So what are the main objectives of ReSChape project? Is actually to explore and understand these social, economic, and environmental changes, and then to evaluate the impact on supply chains. We'll try to actually, we have already worked on these aspects to propose some strategies to reshape supply chains and assure a positive impact on social indicators. Apart from the strategies, we are in the process of also developing some specific models, and particular attention, as you can see also in the slide, will be given in the digitalization aspect, because we want to assure humans, for example, workers, consumers, and in general citizens, that will be at the center of the supply chains. The project will also develop innovative tools, but also policies, by taking into consideration the impact on employment, economic growth, and at the end, what we would like to do is to improve the economic, social, and environmental performance of supply chains in the European Union. So this is broadly what we are trying to achieve with this project. As you can see, the project actually based on these objectives, we have developed 5 working packages, and today's presentation will focus on the first task of work package 3, which is actually the lead partners for this is Aston University and Cranfield University, that are Professor Aris Matopoulos and our valuable research fellow that is here, Alp Yildirim. And what we are trying to do in this specific task is to answer the question how the social sustainability requirements from the focal manufacturing companies cascade down to lower tier suppliers by using specific supplier development strategies and activities. But let's see what we mean by this. So the motivation for our research, as we said, overall for the project and for these tasks, started from the supply chain disruptions that have caused many unforeseen social issues. And of course, we see also new social sustainability norms. For example, I'm sure most of you now, you are working remotely. We see also the 4-day week, more common nowadays. And of course, what we are trying to do is to have more work-life balance. Apart from these challenges that companies are facing, these uncertainties and disruptions have triggered a new way of policy interventions. As you can see in one of these images, we have the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act in Germany, but also in other parts of the world, that make companies to disclose the information on their environmental and social impacts, but not only for the focal company, but also the other tier suppliers. And if they don't comply, it can result in fines or legal action. So most of the companies also, we found based on another study, that they are trying to incorporate in their procurement policy more environmental, social, and governance aspects, so the ESG aspects. However, because most of the companies, they are multinational companies, and they are having different tier of suppliers, and they have, these social actually responsibilities exceed their boundaries. And this is more challenging, particularly for lower tier suppliers. We found a lot of studies that mention that most serious social sustainability breaches are caused by lower tier suppliers. In order to answer this question, so what kind of supplier development strategies and activities companies are engaging in order to improve and cascade down social sustainability requirements to lower tier suppliers, we went through the literature and we identified that mainly companies are using direct control of the supplier development activities. So it's the focal company that will initiate it, or they delegate this to first-tier suppliers or to third-party companies. So third-party companies here, we mean consultancy companies, NGOs, so other companies that they are supporting. And in terms of specific supplier development activities, we found also in the literature that the mainly companies are using incentives. So that means longer term contracts, increased order volumes, monitoring and evaluation as well. So that means having some kind of certification or audits as well. And knowledge sharing, so that mainly is about training and education, and of course arranging some site visits. And with more, let's say, critical suppliers, we see also the collaboration aspect, so developing joint projects and of course cooperating in more product design and development of the products. So in order to answer this question and identify the trends, what we did is we developed a survey and we targeted manufacturing companies in Europe and more specifically procurement, sustainability, or supply chain managers. As you can see, we started in December 2023, and we recently had the first, let's say, responses. So we collected the responses now this month in February, and what I will present you actually are the initial findings. The total respondents, as you can see, is 108, and most of them, they are from the UK, then from Spain, Italy, France, and of course from Germany as well. So quite a diverse, as you can see, target of respondents. And what we found, so we said that there are three main strategies of supplier development, if you remember. And if we compare that per country, we can see that in Germany, for example, and Italy, companies prefer to directly controlling their supplier development activities, while in Spain, there is a preference for delegating the activities to first-tier suppliers. In France and the UK, we see a more mixed approach, the same way of directly controlling the supplier development activities, but also delegating the activities to first-tier suppliers. And an interesting finding here is that the least preferred option from all of this is to delegating the activities to third-party companies. So this is let's say, the initial findings regarding supplier development strategies. So if we see now each strategies, what kind of activities, supplier development activities companies are using. So when they prefer the direct control, then they use monitoring and evaluation. So that means, as you can see based on these pie charts, 56% of the respondents in all European countries implement due diligence processes to ensure that their lower tier suppliers comply with standards and specifications. In terms of knowledge sharing, if we see, it's a mix, and the percentages are really close. So we can see both of training, sending managers to supplier facilities. We don't see, let's say, huge differences in terms of the activities that they are followed. And of course, in terms of collaborations, we see jointly develop projects of corporate social responsibility projects, and of course to work together with these suppliers to develop more sustainable, socially actually sustainable product development and procurement, and also in the production processes. So these are the main findings for direct control. The second strategy that we found, the specific supplier development activities, the first one is incentives. So what it means that is the first-tier suppliers, they will try to improve the social sustainability performance by promising them that they will increase the volume, order of items, or that they will have more longer-term contracts. Monitoring and evaluation plays also a crucial role, and we can see again the same approach around conduct due to diligence processes, but also we can see here the having a grievance mechanism to monitor lower tier suppliers. As you can imagine, in a global interconnected supply chain networks, the most vulnerable stakeholders are usually the workers of suppliers located further upstream in our supply chain. So by having the grievance mechanism, it's a formal actually system or processes to raise that each employer or a group of employers, they can raise their concerns about their rights. Yeah. Apart from monitoring, incentives and monitoring and evaluation, the other aspect is around knowledge sharing. Again, we see conducting training and education, and sending managers to suppliers, facilities to support on these aspects, but also collaboration. And as you can see, 57%, they work together with their suppliers, they cooperate together to identify and address potential social responsibility issues. So that's quite interesting for me. And the last strategy is to bring third-party companies to support to delegate the responsibility of developing these lower tier suppliers. So again, we can see incentives is a good, let's say, activity, and most of the respondents found it that it worked for their company. They have quite used it. And actually, we found in our research also an example of a company working with an NGO, and they arrange funding to train the first and second tier suppliers in South America. Conducting due diligence in the monitor and evaluation is also a key supplier development activity. Most of the companies can work with third-party providers such as EcoVadis, which is an assessment platform for business sustainability, so we can check the social aspects with them. And of course, knowledge sharing. Training and education are common knowledge transfer activities, as you can see in the pie charts. An example we found this was from IKEA, that works with Better Cotton Initiative to transfer sustainability knowledge to their lower tier suppliers through training and education. And we see also collaboration, 40%, again, is a big portion that they jointly develop project with lower tier suppliers, the third parties. So that's also an important supplier development activity that they follow. Apart from the strategies and activities about supplier development, we wanted to see also how companies, they feel that these activities and strategies impact the social sustainability performance, so the perceived impact, yeah, not the actual impact. And we focus on 4 main social sustainability performance indicators, as you will see: worker rights. So here we've taken into consideration about health and safety, training, work-life balance, working time and forced overtime, local community. So if we pay attention on the local community welfare, discrimination, and of course the customers in the aspect of how companies follow specific production regulations and requirements. So this is another category that we capture. So based on this bar chart, you will see that different countries follow a different approach. For example, France, UK, and Spain, the respondents perceive that by following these supplier development activities, it is linked positively, let's say, perceived positively in terms of the customer's indicator. So that means minimize the usage of hazardous materials, comply with local and national quality regulations. Whereas we see from Italy and Germany, the highest responses, they link these activities and strategies with diversity and inclusion. So they improve the social performance in that kind of aspect. So these are now some pie charts that we, for each of the specific supplier sustainability performance indicators, we have some sub-indicators. And what I can say is that we found that supplier social and sustainability development, we can see that promotes mutual learning and knowledge exchange and supports suppliers to develop the necessary capabilities to improve work infrastructure, health and safety procedures. So if you see the percentages, so for example, around health and safety trainings, 56%. And of course, it helps to ensure that we'll have safer products for customers. So production regulations and requirements, as you can see, is 55%. And of course, we are able to provide a more safer working environment for our workers. So if you see the pie charts about discrimination and worker rights, it's again a really positive outcome out of it. So all in all, I hope I'm on time. We can see that most of the companies prefer to have a more direct control approach to the supplier development activities for lower tier suppliers, and a mixed type of supplier development activities applied through countries, as we saw. However, as companies actually, and this is also in line with what they found from Make UK and Lloyds Bank research, that they don't really understand if what they have applied to their supply chain is on track to achieve the set of procurement ESG conditions. And usually it's because of lack of awareness of whether the low tier suppliers meet these social sustainability requirements. Or maybe they don't have the right tools, so technology, so they don't have really the visibility. So as I said, we are in progress, and so that was just initial results. Thank you so much, and any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitra. Yeah, you already have one question in the chat.
Okay.
They thank you and they say it looks very promising. They are interested that you have included UK companies as they will soon face a very different regulatory environment to EU countries. At least if the due diligence directive and the anti-slavery regulation go through. They are asking if you asked about the importance of impending or existing in France and Germany regulation. And also, as she mentioned in the previous slides, she was wondering about the sectoral level.
Yes, thank you so much, first of all, for the questions, really great. So I will start from the last point. In terms of sectors, we didn't really, let's say, had in the questionnaire the specific areas. So we just focus on manufacturing sector, yeah? So we don't have visibility on the differences. For example, if it was automotive sector, we might see, because, you know, as I said, we are in the initial phase of our analysis, we might see also from the respondents, because Alp, if I'm not mistaken, I think we have some question about where they work, the participants. So maybe we can derive it from there. Yeah, thank you, Alp.
You have their categorical information in terms of which manufacturing area, let's say subsector, they work in.
Exactly. So I don't think we have analyzed it yet, yeah, because as I told you, actually it was last week that we got all these, I mean, we cut off and start analyzing, but thank you, that's really good. And then the other question was if you ask about the importance of impending regulation. How do you mean? I don't really...
I mean the corporate social, the corporate due diligence directive, yes, which is currently being debated and which is in trilogue and which is hopefully supposed to come out in the next couple of weeks, and the forced labor regulation, which is also being discussed in trilogue, which are quite big changes. So.
Yes, yes. We didn't really specify, to be honest, in our, so I don't think we have that answer. Yeah, but that's a good actually point. Yeah, yeah. I think we don't have this. Yeah.
No, we don't. We haven't specifically categorized which disruption affected you.
Yes.
We said that based on the overall disruptions, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dimitra. I don't see any other question for you, but let's come back to the questions we had for Marta that we didn't have time to address. Well, one is for both for Marta and for Roberta, and they are asking if you observed an increase in circularity within the value chains post-COVID, as in closing the loop within the EU parts of the value chains by recycling, reusing the end-of-life products, or in other parts of the value chain, for instance, in China, re-importing EOL products back to China, increasing circularity in-house? And if so, what was the observed impact on the global value chains and also the sectors that I think we touched upon already? So, yeah, Roberta and Marta, if you can address those.
Well, thank you. Just briefly, we haven't looked at yet. It's in the work package on the environment, but this is something that still has to come, and we don't know yet. That's too early. Thank you.
Marta?
No, unfortunately, it would be great to know about that, but in the current part of the survey, we haven't asked anything about that. But we are definitely collecting ideas for the second, so maybe.
There is another question for Marta. They thank you for your presentation, and they're asking if you could explain more on the knowledge flow. What are the tangible and intangible interactions that you refer to in your supply chains? And which kind of supply chains have you examined, such as food supply chains or car supply chains? So again, the sector.
Yeah, so I would like to start with the end, the final question. Actually, we took the perspective of the buyer firms, so we haven't really focused on specific supply chains, but we looked at all the manufacturing firms, basically, which are at least medium-sized in these countries. And also, we have questions about auditing the supply chain, not only the direct supplier, but farther away, but we rather focused because of simplicity on the first step, so on the major strategic suppliers of these firms and how their relationship changes. So we have anything there basically because we haven't limited our focus to specific supply chains, but to specific types of firms in industries. About the tangible and intangible, so it was on the introductory slide, and so it is a bigger scope thing within the project, not only not the survey is the one which is specifically targets that. We know something about the importance of different geographical markets, but it's very vague information to be able to tell more. So I think other parts of the project will inform us more about these linkages, and there might be some potential when we connect the survey data to administrative data as well. But it's still, so we will need to see what we can do there. About the knowledge flow, so we had basically two types of questions, one focusing on specific suppliers, about which we asked quite a lot of details, also the specific input they supply to the firm. And there we asked what kind of information they share basically, or whether they do joint innovation with that specific supplier and how it changed over time. And for each and every respondent, we asked the same thing for a supplier within the EU and another one outside the EU in order to be able to draw some comparison, to compare them and to draw some comparable results. And the other set of questions I haven't showed you today is about different types of, so it's more about collaboration with suppliers, including joint innovation, and also sharing know-how and sharing or exchanging production technologies. And there we asked whether firms do any of these with any of their strategic suppliers, and if yes, what is the most important reason for driving this, and if no, why not? So intellectual property rights, and they don't feel the need for that. So many options were there. So we wanted to learn about some important barriers or some important potentials for promoting maybe more collaboration with suppliers. So in a nutshell, that was mainly our focus on knowledge flows. Thanks.
Thank you, Marta. Another question for Dimitra. You mentioned local community, but what specific indicators for social impact to local communities did you consider?
Yeah, thank you, Carolina. So we focus on, I think Alp already replied, prioritizing local suppliers, unemployed youth, and local community welfare. So of course we're more, but these were the key aspects that we focus.
Okay, thank you. We have another question for Marta. They are asking if you consider the outcomes also from the customer's perspective in terms of firm strategy and performance. In other words, what can be the effects of changes in the suppliers and how to evaluate customers' reactions on that?
Great question. So we focus on the performance and on the outcomes of buyers, basically who were our respondents. It would be great to take a look at both the supplier and the buyer side of the very same firm. We need to restrict ourselves, and that's why we focus on suppliers and relationship with suppliers. So that's what we can do for the time being, at least with the survey. With other parts of the project, we can do more on that.
Okay, thank you, Marta. Let me share my screen again, because we also prepared for you Miro that we are going to share in the chat now. So you can also enter there and see challenges and propose challenges and solutions to those challenges for each one of the projects after what you saw today. So we know we are running out of time. We don't have time today for doing that, but we're going to leave the Miro board open for a week. So if you could enter in the coming days, or even today if you prefer, and leave there your input on those, we would really appreciate, because as you have seen in the presentations, this project is also about gathering insights, not only from literature, but also from the knowledge of stakeholders. So we really appreciate your contributions on that. Meanwhile, I think the link is in the chat. Yeah, you can see the link in the chat. So yeah, you can feel free, please, to enter there and have a look at the Miro. But as we are, yeah, I think we can have a couple of minutes. So you enter there and you familiarize with the Miro, and then meanwhile, if somebody leaves a question in the chat, and if not, we move on to the conclusions of the. So yeah, let's have 2 minutes for you to enter the Miro, see if it works, and familiarize yourself with it. Okay,
Carolina.
Yes.
Hi, Carolina. Maybe you can also share the screen of the Miro if you have it there, so that people can see it.
I don't have it here, so if you can, yeah, I can stop sharing, and if you can share it, it will be fine.
Okay. I don't. Can you share it, Alicia?
Okay.
Sorry. So the idea with this Miro board was to give the possibility to all the participants to give comments, suggestions to the 3 projects. I think you have access to, yes, here you see how it's structured. So it's really something simple where the idea is to collect questions, suggestions. Maybe Carol, maybe we can add the link to our website, and so people can go to our website and find information there, some other information about the project. And so it's a kind of way to keep on with the contact and to get in touch with you. So we will organize, each project will organize its own workshops, but most probably we will organize also another joint workshop in the next months. So I think it's a good way to keep on the contact among all the partners. So yes, so I don't know if there are other comments or if you want to add something else, Carolina.
Yes, just in a nutshell, thank you everybody for attending today, and just some insights that we all gained together in the webinar. So wanted to highlight first the geographical component that we have seen in several projects where we realized there is a reshoring trends in some areas. So they're restarting to consider Europe as a sourcing country. And we also see how the difference between Western and Eastern countries impact on the kind of global supply chains, the part of the global supply chain. So this is one of the learnings we have had today. But also how after COVID and the war in Ukraine, we saw how disruptions were faced and how it was, how the supply chains were more resilient after that. So a lot of disruptions were in terms of supplier impact, and we saw that resilience could be gained through monitoring of suppliers, through auditing, but also through collaboration. And collaboration entailed also knowledge sharing, right? And incentives and motivation. So this way of making resilient supply chains has to do with reshoring, but also has to do with redundancy of suppliers and monitoring and collaboration of suppliers. So those are, I think, the common trends that we have seen throughout all the presentations. But last, we also focused on the social impact and of the supply chains, and we saw that supply chains have to have the human at the center. And we saw also how companies position their insights in terms of the social impact. Different KPIs are going to have, but again, collaboration with the suppliers appeared in that impact that we are going to have for future supply chains. So with that, I think we can leave it here. I think we are just in time. So thank you everybody for your smooth collaboration in the presentations, and hopefully we will see each other in upcoming webinars of these projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye.
And thank you to the speakers. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.